Hello, fellow human light beings. This is Mahadeva, the Thunder Wizard. Welcome back to the Thunder Wizard YouTube channel, the gathering place for all 5D starseeds and light workers. What I want to talk to you about today has to do with this symbol. And I want to explain to you why the interdimensional meditations are so powerful and talk about practical understandings, new understandings that I've come to become aware of in terms of higher dimensions. I've learned why the practices I teach, why they are so incredibly powerful, and why they have power to destroy negativity, and why I believe these are the fastest ways to shift our energy up to what we're calling 5D. So you may be familiar with this video I've got up here, which shows, again, using the Merkaba, which is, again, a three-dimensional version of this eight-pointed syllable. This is also called the Thunder Wheel. And as you know, if you have any experience with my practices, if you've been following me, read my books, I work with doing rituals in an 8-pointed star. So the 8-pointed star, you know, if we do just a basic ritual of opening a sacred space, we'll face north, and we'll do, you know, something like heaven, earth, and man, Odin, Vili, and Ve. You know, you touch the three dantians, move in a clockwise fashion, go northeast, then east, southeast, south, southwest, west, northwest, and back to north again, and you pull it together. And when you do that, for some reason, it creates a very powerful place to accomplish your intentions. So there's a reason for that. So these 8 points, this is, if you look up here, you'll see that when I move directions, I move to one of these 8 points. It's not, whenever I move to a specific or face a specific direction, it's always very precise. There's nothing random. And the reason for that, now I know, you know, I did it because that's how I was taught. And they even said that these 8 points are dimensional points. I just took that to mean, you know, it's a fancy way of saying it's a fulcrum for energy, and which of course it is, but it's more than that. It is actually dimensional gateways. And so I've had experiences, of course. You know, I was strictly forbidden from going into any kind of competition or anything like that. I was also forbidden from getting into fights or using this art against anybody else. And the reason they said is because it's not fair. It's like walking into a knife fight with a machine gun. It's not fair. I learned through personal interaction that it was incredibly powerful. Every now and then, somebody who practiced MMA or jiu-jitsu or whatever would want to spar with me, and I would say, I don't spar, but I'll give you a slight demonstration. And every single time, you know, their minds were completely blown. I'd barely touch somebody. There was one time a guy, 250 pounds, 6 foot, MMA jiu-jitsu guy, and he heard that I did kung fu, and of course, you know, in that back then, you know, that was 30 years ago. That was, you know, they thought everything that wasn't MMA or jiu-jitsu was no good. So he laughed and he said, blah blah, and I said, okay, you know, and he kept on pressing me. I want to see what this is. Show me what you got. I said, I don't fight. I don't spar. So I finally said, okay, I'll show you what this is, and you know, get into a defensive posture. Whatever your defensive posture is, go ahead and get into it. So he got into a defensive posture. And it would have been a great posture for the average striker, the average martial art. He would have been completely protected, you know, big, strong, muscular arms, and he knew how to protect himself. And I said, I'm just going to barely touch you. And I pointed to where I was going to touch him on his forearm. I said, I'm just going to barely touch you. You're not going to be able to stop me. And once I do, you're going to be helpless. And you'll know that, this is something different. He thought that, of course, was hilarious. Why wouldn't he? And I did. I just barely tapped him right on the forearm. His arm went completely dead, fell down in front of him, completely dead. He couldn't move it. His face went white. His eyes filled with tears, and his lips started to quiver, like he was going to cry, like a little kid. This big, giant, tough guy who could stand there and get punched for rounds and rounds. He couldn't handle one little tap from me. And I didn't hit him hard. I channeled higher dimensional energy. Now, I didn't know that's what I was doing, but that's what is happening when we're doing these movements. These movements are, sorry, give me a second here. These movements are tapping into these 8 directions. So why is this important? You can see the Merkaba that I'm working in as I'm doing those moves is a 3rd dimensional representation of what those 8 points are. And so that this 8-pointed star that you're looking at right here, that is actually what happens when you shine light through a tesseract. A tesseract would be the 4th dimension. So again, we've got specific reference points. The 2nd dimension, which has no up or no down, it's just forward, backward, left, and right. It's the only directions they can go. You put a tiny little, wall of matchboxes in front of them. They can't get over it. They can't get past it. You tell a 2-dimensional person, well, just climb over. They go, what is over? You say, oh, it's when you go up. They go, what is up? I don't know what that is. And no matter how much you try to explain to the 2-dimensional people what up is, they'll never understand you. Never. Just like we will never understand all of the other directions that exist just in the 4th dimension, which is time. So the 2nd dimension has 4 spatial reference points, and you draw a line from each point and you create a square. That's where they live, on this flat plane of a square. In the 3rd dimension, you now add 2 directions, up and down. So that means you have 2 flat planes above each other. You then draw lines between those 8 reference points, and what do you get? You get a box. That is the 3rd dimension. So we understand up and down. Now, the one thing that physicists don't understand is that a being at the 2nd dimension has very little emotional energy and very little life force energy in comparison to us. Our energy, if we were to just interact with 2-dimensional beings, the energy and the emotions would be so intense it would be traumatizing for them, and they would think they were losing their mind. So the same is true. You go up from 4 reference points to 8, which means the intensity of the emotions, the intensity of the energy goes up not just from 1 to 2, it goes from 4 to 8, and it's far beyond anything 2-dimensional beings can even handle. So the same is true when we go from the 3rd dimension to the 4th dimension. And you look at the reference points. So we have 8 reference points, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, draw lines, it's a box. 8 reference points, which gives us all of the directions we can move. So the 4th dimensional person has 16 reference points, physical reference points, which means that there are directions to them that we can't see, we can't understand. And we have up, down, backwards and forwards, left and right. And if we go into the 4th dimension, you have all those, you have up, down, backwards and forwards, left and right, Fligelport, Pagelkankt, Kegiskekt, and Porgekokt, along with Kigikwakt and Korgiskekt. Those are the other directions. They're meaningless to us. A 4th dimensional person says, and you say, I can't go forward in time. I can't go back in time. You know, that's the fourth dimension. The fourth dimensional person says, oh, all you have to do is go Korgelsklakt. And I go, I don't know what Korgelsklakt is. And he goes, oh, well, instead of going up or left, you go Korgelsklakt. And I go, I don't know what that is. No amount of explaining to me is going to explain to me what direction Korgelsklakt is, because I'm in the third dimension, and I can't envision it. It's impossible. But that's what it would take. You want to go backwards in times, forwards in times, you got to go Korgelsklakt. So in terms of energy, right? So the fourth dimension, if you try and look at it in a two-dimensional version in the third dimension, you will get what is called a tesseract. Now I'm trying to represent it here with these when I'm using the Merkaba, and I've got the Merkaba, as you see that it's a third dimensional representation of these 8 points, right? But so the point I'm trying to make is just stick with me if you can. The point I'm trying to make is that we are moving into 5D supposedly, whether that's the actual fifth dimension or not, or just a higher frequency of the third dimension, I don't know. For right now, it's just a word that we use. And unfortunately, a lot of the New Age people throw around, I'm in the fourth dimension, I'm in the fifth dimension, I'm in the sixth dimension. They have no idea what they're talking about. Because if you were to shift from the third dimension to the fourth dimension, you would be invisible to anybody in the third dimension, no matter what frequency they were at, because of all the different directions. So not only does the reference points double, the energy doubles, the emotions also double, far beyond what you, not just like, you know, what you think, I feel happy, I'm doubled, now I'm twice as happy as I was. No, it's all those different directions and all those different energies. It's more than your third dimensional being can tolerate. It tear you apart. But if we're going to shift, we have to have access to that. So when you do any of the practices I teach you here at thunderwizard.com or in my books or anything like that, even if you're just using the 8 directions, what ends up happening, like if you start facing north and you go clockwise to each one of the directions and you do the Odin, Vili, and Ve and you open up the 3 centers, you're actually bringing down the energy from higher dimensions, which does what? It gives you the ability to do things like go forward in time, backward in time. What does that mean? Your third dimensional experience doesn't change, but your intention now can have access to, instead of 8 reference points, which means you can't go forward or backward in time, now all of a sudden you have 16 reference points, which means that your intention can go into any time period, any direction it wants. Deities. Let's talk about deities for a moment. So before Vedic practitioners had idols, now you can get an idol of Kali, idol of Ganesha, right? They started doing that in the Middle Ages to copy Romans and Greeks who had idols of the gods. But before that, they had yantras. Yantras was a 2-dimensional drawing. This is a yantra. Here's another yantra. It's called the Shri yantra. You've probably seen it before. This is a deity. How can this be a deity, you say? Well, there is a deity in a higher dimension. I don't know which dimension it is. But when you shine a light on that actual being, when the shadow of that hits the third dimension, it creates this 2-dimensional symbol that we have here. That's the symbol that you see, but what you're looking at is a 2-dimensional representation of a higher dimensional being that you can't comprehend. So when you meditate on that, you don't realize it, but you're actually tapping into this Merkaba, which when you're doing the spirit fighting is pulling the higher dimensional energy into your body in the third dimension. What is that going to do? Well, since the spirit fighting is focused on martial arts and exorcism, you're going to have an energy that when you apply that energy to a third dimensional force, whether it's a physical human or a demon, which a demon is a second dimensional energy that's negative and flying around in the third dimension. That's why the spirit fighters could just slice through these beings, tear them to pieces. And it's because they were doing practices facing each one of these directions in different combinations, also accessing the shin, the heart mind, and pulling that energy around and doing all kinds of stuff. So this is what gave them all the power. And this is, when I was training, and MMA guys would want to spar with me, and I would say, I'm not going to spar with you. I'll just tap you on the forearm. And I'd say, just get prepared to block this. But I would just barely tap them, and then they would start, their arm would go numb, their face would go, and they'd start crying, their lip would quiver, and they'd say, how did you do that? Or when they tried to come at me, and I would just get into the mindset, and next thing I knew, they were behind me, and they'd say, how did you do that? I'd say, I didn't do anything. I just didn't resist you. And from there, they thought that they actually went through me, or that I disappeared and reappeared. What's happening? How does that happen? Higher dimensional energy that cannot be comprehended in the third dimension. So when you worship the deity behind this, the Shri Yantra, and there are numerous mantras for this, what are you doing? You are tapping into an entity, an actual personality, just like you, but it's in a much higher dimension. So just to give you an idea of how powerful a deity is, if your consciousness was able to be transported to, let's say, just the fifth dimension, not the new age, I'm in 5D, that's nonsense. The actual fifth dimension, which has 16 reference points. So there's not just up, down, back, forth. There are Kafligadigork and Kagawakt and Mekaspankt and all kinds of other directions we can't even begin to understand. And the energy, the actual life force energy in that fifth dimensional space is so far beyond anything in the third dimension. It's gone from 8 reference points to 16 to 32. That's how many levels of energy it's expanded. The emotions in there have also been expanded to far beyond anything. If you were to feel 100% the emotions and the energy that a fifth dimensional being had, you would explode. You wouldn't be able to. You'd disappear. You would no longer be in the third dimension. Period. End of story. So that's why those of you who are doing interdimensional meditation, that's why it can be so intense and so bizarre, because you're being expanded beyond your third dimensional capabilities. So when you worship one of these deities, just to give you an example, in the fifth dimension, and this is coming from science, not from New Age spirituality, in the fifth dimension, if you were in the fifth dimension, you would have the ability to be in any physical location, as many physical locations as you want, infinite numbers of physical locations instantly. And you could be doing as many different things. You could be skiing, you could be kayaking, you could be surfing, you could be playing chess, you could be doing any infinite amount of things, and you would be able to put 100% of your attention and focus into each one of those things. So you wouldn't be like trying to do a bunch of things at once. You would instantly be doing infinite amounts of things in infinite amounts of places at one time. You would also be in as many different times. You want to be in 1825, you want to be in 2097, you want to be in 1984, you want to be in right now. You can be in as many different times, in as many different locations, doing as many things as you possibly can. Think about the amount of energy that must be available for that to happen. Think about the amount of emotions, because you could be having intense emotions in each one of those experiences far beyond anything humans have. That's just in the fifth dimension. So that would mean that if all of the humans on planet Earth wanted to meditate and communicate with a fifth dimensional being. That fifth dimensional being would be able to have 100% full interaction with every single human on Earth simultaneously. Now we're talking about a God. But the truth is, they're just a being. They're just a conscious personality, just like you, but they're in a higher dimension. So the moment you start using these yantras, using these symbols, and you start physicalizing them, you then start pulling those energies to you. That's why now, 30 years later, I look back and I realize that I wasn't anything special, but I was doing these practices. I was doing the spirit fighting sets that I had been taught, and I was told that this was, super forbidden, and it was done to fight evil spirits, and you can't ever use this, you can't show this to anybody. And, anybody that wanted to spar with me, they couldn't touch me. And the slightest tap from me could drop them like they were, like they were just made out of paper. It's because I was channeling higher dimensional energy. Why is this important? We are going through a shift, and I don't know if you feel it, but I feel it. The energy that's going through my body is very challenging, and I find myself having higher, I'm more sensitive to everything. I'm in states of I go through a lot of different emotional ups and downs. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, a lot of all kinds of stuff. And I realized today, of course I'm going to have these feelings. These are higher dimensional energies, and my human body doesn't know what to do with it. And also realizing that things are not okay here. There's a dark force elite running the show, and they're doing horrible things on all kinds of levels: spiritual, energetic, physical, political, economic. On every level, they're destroying our reality. So my spirit is responding. Something is wrong. So we've got a lot of things going on, and this is again why I recommend that people do the practices I teach. Go, as simple as reading the Thunder Wizard shamanism books and learning how to use the thunder wheel, doing the rituals that I teach you, just the free ones on the channel, doing the interdimensional meditations, doing all of the mudras and the qigong, doing the lightning qigong, if you go to thunderwizard.com and do the Warrior 90-day lightning qigong practices, doing the Maoshan practices I teach, doing the spirit fighter practices, the most powerful ones they are. The reason why they're so powerful is because you're tapping into energies from higher dimensions. Now there's a footwork practice from this that I haven't taught, because I will only teach it in person, and so I hope to start doing that. But as you know, when you go from the second dimension to the third, you go from 4 reference points to 8. When you go from the third to the fourth, you go from 8 reference points to 16. When you go from the fourth to the fifth, you go from 16 to 32 reference points. And when you go from the fifth to the sixth dimension, you go from 32 to 64 reference points. That is important because the footwork practice that I learned had 64 steps, and I remember learning it. And once I got and did that final 64th step, and I had memorized it and done that last one, I felt this huge amount of energy go through my body. And everybody that I've taught has done the same thing. They'll do it and they go, "What was that?" I just felt this really interesting, cool energy just come into my body. So that tells me we're tapping into 6th dimensional energy. Now that must mean that the energy that's being released when we're doing these things is unbelievable, which again explains why it's used for fighting evil spirits. But it also explains why these guys who did this were able to do all kinds of crazy magic. And the reason why I'm sharing it with people, and I think everybody who wants to should have access to it, because we're shifting to a higher dimension. We need to get used to those energies. So that's why I make all this stuff available to you. Anyway, we've got some other stuff that I'm doing here, reversenarcabuse.com, if you want to understand the two-dimensional, because it's two-dimensional. If you want to know the two-dimensional narcissistic devaluation programming that has been going on planet Earth from the beginning, and that is being used by the dark force elites to destroy you and destroy this world, you can check that out, reversenarcabuse.com. Quantum shifting builds on that. We talk about that. Quantum shifting #1 is free. You can get it on the free YouTube channel, or at thunderwizard.com. You can also find quantum shifting #1, which is free. And then there are going to be a total of 7 of those videos. When enough people show interest, I'll upload those other ones. I've uploaded up to #3, and little more interest, and I'll put together #4 and put that up there. But this is building on this idea. I want you to have an understanding of where my thoughts are going towards when I talk about quantum shifting. When I talk about reversing narcissistic abuse, I'm talking about tapping into these higher dimensional energies so that we will be able to manifest and choose to create what people call 5D, this new reality, this new awakening. These are the tools that I have available to me, and I now have a greater understanding of them, and I offer them to you. So you know where to go. Thunderwizard.com. You can subscribe various levels. You can go to the shop at thunderwizard.com if you want to do the spirit fighting, and reversenarcabuse.com to learn more about the basics of the two-dimensional programming that is going on. And there it is. So we've got another interdimensional meditation live guided tonight at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, and we do that every Wednesday and every Saturday, and I hope you'll show up. The more people that show up, the more powerful these meditations are. My understanding from my higher dimensional friends is that these meditations are changing everything. And there may only be 30 of us at a time doing it, but that's 30 times the power of each of us. Each of us doing interdimensional meditations and intentions is powerful. You now times it by 30, and I say that because that's usually how many people show up. Imagine if we had hundreds or thousands. The world would change instantaneously. And I keep getting more information that the higher dimensional beings are prepared to give us even more energy for these meditations. And I just got a jolt as I said that. So I hope you'll show up to that. Anyway, I hope this was interesting. I'll see you guys all in about 4.5 hours. Please take very good care of yourselves.